A boy with cracked feet and ragged clothes slipped past the hedge of a sprawling mansion. In the garden sat a young girl in a wheelchair, her small hands folded in her lap, her face clouded with sadness. Then, without saying a word, the boy began to dance. Not for money, not for food, but simply to make her smile. What followed would change the lives of a grieving millionaire and his broken daughter forever. Edward Hawthorne was among the most powerful men in the city. His empire stretched across industries, technology, finance, real estate. His name carried weight in boardrooms and governments. People whispered that Edward could buy anything, solve anything, control anything. Yet within the grand halls of his mansion, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy silence of grief. The kind that pressed against the walls and made every footstep echo like a reminder of what was lost. His beloved wife, Grace, had died in a tragic car accident. Their only daughter, Lily, survived, but her legs were left paralyzed, her body forever changed. The laughter that once filled their home had vanished like smoke. Lily rarely spoke. She spent her days staring out the window or being wheeled into the garden by her nurse, her eyes distant, her spirit fading. Edward, a man who had built an empire by solving impossible problems, tried everything wealth could offer. Surgeries in Switzerland, specialists in Boston, cutting-edge experimental treatments in Germany. He wrote checks with numbers that made hospital administrators weep with gratitude. Millions spent, experts flown in, the finest equipment money could purchase. But nothing worked. His daughter remained bound to her chair, and worse, her light was dimming. Day by day, week by week, she retreated further into herself. Edward saw it happening and felt powerless for the first time in his life. Behind closed doors, this man of steel and strategy would stand by her bedroom door, listening to the silence, his heart breaking in ways no boardroom battle had ever prepared him for. But fate had other plans. On one quiet afternoon, Lily sat alone under the shade of a sprawling oak tree, her eyes dull, her hands resting lifelessly in her lap. The nurse had gone inside for tea. The garden was still except for the lazy hum of bees and the distant sound of traffic beyond the estate walls. Then she noticed movement near the gate. A boy, barefoot, his skin sun-darkened, his clothes torn and too large for his thin frame, slipped through a gap in the hedge. His name was Mason Brooks, though few in the city knew it. Most just called him that dancing kid, or didn't call him anything at all. Mason was an orphan, no parents, no family, no bed except the cold pavement of the city streets. Some nights he slept under bridges near the river. Other nights he found shelter in the doorways of closed shops or the corners of construction sites. Days he danced on street corners and at traffic lights, his movements exaggerated and joyful, hoping passing drivers might toss him a coin or two. Dancing was his survival. When hunger gnawed at his belly and made his body ache, if he moved, if he spun and leaped, the pain felt lighter. When people laughed at his silly movements for a brief moment, he felt seen. He felt human. Dancing was the one thing that made him feel like more than just another invisible street kid. That afternoon, Mason had been wandering past the high walls of the Hawthorne estate. Through a crack in the gate, he glimpsed the garden. And the girl. She sat so still, so sad, her head tilted down, her small shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to disappear. Something in Mason's chest tightened. He knew that look. He had seen it in his own reflection in shop windows. He had felt it in his bones on nights when the world seemed too big and too cold, and he was too small to matter. He thought, she looks the way I feel sometimes, sad, alone, like nobody sees her. And then another thought, maybe I can make her smile. Maybe I can chase that sadness away, even if it's just for a minute. So Mason slipped quietly through the hedge and stepped onto the perfectly manicured lawn. He didn't plan what came next. He just began. He danced. Not a polished, practiced routine. Not the kind of dance you'd see on television or in a theater. His arms flailed wildly like a clown's. He spun too fast and stumbled on purpose, catching himself with exaggerated shock written across his face. He made ridiculous expressions, crossed his eyes, puffed out his cheeks, stuck out his tongue, and moved his body in ways that looked absolutely absurd. At first, Lily only blinked. Her eyes followed him, confused. Then her lips trembled. Then for the first time in months, she laughed. It was a bright, pure laugh that leapt across the garden like a startled bird taking flight. The sound carried through the open doors, up the marble steps, and into the mansion itself. Mason grinned and danced harder. He leaped. He rolled on the grass. He bowed grandly like a performer taking applause from an invisible audience. Lily clapped her hands and her laughter rose with every silly twist and spin of his body. In that moment, the heavy silence of the Hawthorne mansion shattered like glass. Inside, Edward Hawthorne froze mid-step. His coffee cup hovered inches from his lips. Was that laughter? His daughter's laughter? He set the cup down with shaking hands and rushed to the balcony, and his heart nearly stopped. There on his perfectly groomed lawn, his daughter was laughing. Her cheeks were flushed. Her hands clapped together with joy. And the source of this miracle was not a surgeon, not a machine, not the result of millions spent. It was a ragged orphan, barefoot, dirty, dancing on his grass like a street performer at a festival. Edward's first reaction was anger. Who was this boy? How had he breached the estate's security? What was he doing on the property? But when his eyes fell on Lily's face, glowing, alive, radiant with something he thought he'd buried with his wife, something inside him shifted. The anger cracked, and underneath it, for the first time in years, he saw hope. What Edward didn't realize in that moment was that the ragged boy dancing on his lawn was about to do something no amount of money ever could. He was about to give Edward back his daughter, and in doing so, teach him the one lesson his empire had never prepared him for. One quiet afternoon, while the world outside moved on, something unexpected slipped through the hedge and into their hearts. The next day, Mason returned. He appeared at the same gap in the hedge just after noon, when the sun hung high and the garden shimmered with heat. Lily sat in her usual spot beneath the oak, her nurse dozing on a bench nearby. The moment Lily saw him, her face brightened. She didn't speak. She rarely did. But she lifted one hand in a small, tentative wave. Mason grinned and stepped onto the grass. He danced again. This time he added sound effects, whooshing noises as he spun, exaggerated grunts when he pretended to stumble. Lily's laughter rang out clear and strong, startling a flock of sparrows from the branches above. By the third day, Edward was waiting. He stood near the oak tree, arms crossed, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit despite the afternoon heat. His presence was deliberate, unmistakable. When Mason slipped through the hedge and saw him, the boy froze mid-step. For a long moment, neither spoke. Edward studied him carefully, the torn shirt hanging off thin shoulders, the shorts held up by a frayed piece of rope, the bare feet caked with dust. But it was the boy's eyes that held Edward's attention. Steady, honest, unafraid, despite being clearly caught. "Why are you here?" Edward's voice was low, controlled, the tone he used in negotiations. Mason swallowed but didn't look away. "She looks sad, sir." "That doesn't answer my question." The boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I thought maybe I could make her smile. I don't want anything. I can leave if you want. I won't come back." Edward's jaw tightened. He had expected excuses, lies, maybe even begging. But this simple honesty caught him off guard. "You trespassed onto private property. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir." "You could be arrested." Mason nodded, his gaze dropping to the grass. "I know. I'm sorry." Behind them, Lily made a small sound, half gasp, half protest. Edward glanced back and saw his daughter's hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic. The sight pierced him. He turned back to Mason and exhaled slowly. "What's your name?" "Mason, sir. Mason Brooks." "And where are your parents, Mason Brooks?" "Don't have any, sir." "Where do you live?" A pause. "Different places." Edward closed his eyes briefly. He knew what that meant. He had seen enough of the city's underbelly through Grace's charity work to recognize a street child when one stood before him. When he opened his eyes again, his expression had softened, just slightly. "Listen to me carefully," Edward said. If you want to come here, you follow my rules. Understood? Mason's head snapped up, surprise flooding his face. You? You're not sending me away? I'm setting conditions. Edward gestured toward the garden. You may dance, but only here, in the open, where the staff can see you. No sneaking, no hiding. You come through the front gate and you announce yourself to security. Okay, yes sir. And before you leave each time, you eat a proper meal in the kitchen. Mrs. Vale will arrange it. Mason's throat worked as he swallowed. I don't want to be trouble. Those are the rules, Edward interrupted. You break them, you don't come back. Clear? Clear, sir. Edward studied him a moment longer, then gave a single sharp nod. Good. Now dance for my daughter before she bursts from impatience. Mason's face split into a grin, so wide it seemed to light up the entire garden. He turned toward Lily, who clapped her hands together once, twice, the sound sharp and eager, and he danced. That evening after Mason had left, escorted to the gate by a bemused security guard, Edward found Mrs. Vale in the kitchen. She was a woman in her late 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, who had been with the household since before Lily was born. She ran the mansion with quiet efficiency and a grandmother's intuition. The boy ate? Edward asked. Like he hadn't seen food in days, sir? Mrs. Vale wiped her hands on her apron, her expression carefully neutral. Which he probably hadn't. Edward leaned against the doorframe. He's to be fed every time he comes, whatever he wants. Make sure of it. Already planned on it, sir. She paused, then added more softly, It's good to hear Miss Lily laugh again. Edward's throat tightened. He nodded once and turned to leave, but Mrs. Vale's voice stopped him. Mr. Hawthorne? The boy's feet were in terrible shape. Cuts, blisters. He tried to hide them, but I saw. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a pair of thick cotton socks. I was thinking these might have been left behind by mistake, near the back door, where someone might find them on their way out. Edward looked at the socks, then at Mrs. Vale's knowing eyes. The corner of his mouth lifted, barely. Very careless of you, Mrs. Vale. I'm getting old, sir. Memory's not what it was. He left her smiling quietly to herself in the kitchen. The pattern established itself quickly. Mason came every afternoon, announced himself to the guards, and danced in the garden, while Lily watched and laughed and clapped. Afterward, he ate in the kitchen, huge portions of rice, stew, fruit, bread, while Mrs. Vale bustled around him, occasionally setting down an extra sandwich, in case he was still hungry, or a glass of juice that might go bad otherwise. On the fourth day, Edward noticed something. He was watching from the study window when it happened. Mason was in the middle of an elaborate routine, spinning and leaping, when suddenly he stumbled for real. Not the exaggerated pratfall he usually performed, but an actual loss of balance. He caught himself quickly, but not before Lily's hands shot out, gripping the wheels of her chair as if she wanted to reach for him. And then Edward saw it. Lily's fingers began to tap, not randomly, not unconsciously. They were tapping rhythm against the armrest of her wheelchair. 1, 2, 3, 4, matching the imaginary beat of Mason's movements. Her face was focused, intent, as if she was hearing music that wasn't there and trying to capture it with her fingertips. It was purposeful, voluntary. Edward's hand pressed against the window glass. In 2 years of therapy, specialists had tried everything to get Lily to initiate movement, to choose to move, not just respond to prompts. And here she was, tapping out rhythm like it was the most natural thing in the world. He pulled out his phone and texted Dr. Chen immediately. Voluntary finger movement observed. Rhythmic pattern, unprompted. The reply came seconds later. That's significant. Very significant. Continue whatever you're doing. Edward looked back at the garden. Mason was bowing theatrically while Lily clapped. And yes, there it was again, her fingers tapping against the chair between claps, keeping time, keeping rhythm, keeping something alive that had been dormant for so long. Edward sank into his desk chair, overwhelmed. That evening, his phone rang. The name on the screen made him grimace. Harper Cole. Harper was a business associate, a public relations consultant Edward had worked with for years. ruthlessly effective, politically connected, and utterly focused on image management. Edward, we need to talk. Harper's voice was clipped, professional. I'm hearing things. About? About a street kid frequenting your estate. Is it true? Edward's jaw tightened. Where did you hear that? Security firms talk. Drivers talk. People notice when a billionaire starts letting homeless children through the gates. A pause. Edward, I'm saying this as a friend. This could become a problem. The boy dances for my daughter. She laughs. That's not a problem. It's a reputation issue, Harper pressed. You're a public figure, board member of 3 major corporations. Your name carries weight. If this gets out the wrong way, Hawthorne allows unvetted minor onto property. The optics are terrible. Liability concerns, safety questions. The board will ask questions. Let them ask. Edward, my daughter is laughing again, Harper, for the first time in 2 years. I don't care about optics. You should. Harper's voice hardened slightly. I'm advising you to handle this carefully. Get the boy proper clearance, background checks, documentation, or better yet, find a professional, a performer, a therapist, someone vetted, to do what this street kid is doing. Edward closed his eyes. It wouldn't be the same. Maybe not, but it would be safe. Think about it. The line went dead. Edward sat in the darkened study for a long time, Harper's words echoing in his mind. Part of him, the businessman, the strategist, understood the concerns, knew they were valid. But another part, the part that was simply a father, didn't care about any of it. He thought of Lily's fingers tapping rhythm. He thought of Mason's honest eyes, and he made his choice. 2 days later, Mason arrived as usual. The guard at the gate waved him through with a friendly nod, the same guard who now knew him by name and sometimes slipped him an orange or a granola bar. Mason danced. Lily laughed. The afternoon unfolded like all the others. But that evening, after Mason had left and the mansion settled into its usual quiet, the head of security knocked on Edward's study door. Sir, we have a flag in the gate logs. Edward looked up from his laptop. What kind of flag? Unknown visitor. 3 separate entries this week at unusual times. Early morning, before staff arrival. The system tagged them as potential security breaches. He held out a tablet showing grainy footage timestamps. We swept the grounds. No damage, no theft. But someone's been coming and going. We can't identify them on camera. Edward's stomach tightened. When was the last entry? This morning, 5:47 a.m. Increase patrols, check all entry points, report anything unusual directly to me. Yes, sir. The guard hesitated. Should we inform the board's security liaison? Mr. Sir, Cole requested to be kept in the loop on any... No, Edward said sharply. Not yet. Handle it internally first. Understood, sir. After the guard left, Edward stood and walked to the window overlooking the garden. The oak tree stood dark against the twilight sky. The wheelchair was gone, rolled back inside for the night. He pulled out his phone and stared at Harper's last message. Think carefully about who you're letting into your life. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed easily. Edward deleted the message. Then he looked at the gate logs on his desk, at the mysterious timestamps, at the unexplained breach in his carefully controlled world. And for the first time since this all began, he felt the weight of a question he couldn't answer. What else was slipping through the cracks of his fortress, and would it heal them or break them apart? The next afternoon, the garden remembered. It remembered birdsong, the way wind moves through leaves like someone turning the pages of a book, the way laughter carries better than sorrow. At 4 o'clock, the side gate clicked and Mason slipped in with his visitor, past lanyard too big for his neck. He raised it like a trophy to the guard, then to me, grinning as if he'd been knighted. Good afternoon, Lady Lily, he announced, sweeping a bow so deep he nearly toppled. Today's program features world-class nonsense. I was ready, hands warm, fingers sitting like small questions on the armrests. The siren first, I said, but slower. You were too fast yesterday. Ah, the director has notes. He cupped his hands, wobbled his cheeks, and made the sound of a half-hearted police car that had decided to become a duck. I giggled, then clapped twice, then once. Tap, 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 our code. He matched it with steps. Heel, toe, pause. When he stumbled on purpose, he caught himself with a flourish to the rosebush. Respect, he told it solemnly. You are the true star. I sat taller without thinking about it. When he spun, I spun my chair a quarter turn, then another. My palms tingled. It wasn't magic. It was a kind of small courage that had been sleeping, waking up like a cat. Mrs. Vale came out with the tray, soup, bread, and an apple, and, placed as if accidentally, a thin pair of gray socks folded into a neat square. Mason glanced at them and back at her. She was suddenly very interested in a leaf on the hedge. What else, he asked me after he'd eaten. Shall we audition new material for the director? Do the one where your feet are made of fire, I said, but pretend you don't know. He looked down at his bare toes, shrieked, and hopscotched across the grass like the lawn was popcorn. I clapped in time, and my fingers didn't tremble. Tap, 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 tap. When he bowed at the end, I said, again, but this time you realize too late and fall on the last step. He nodded, stage serious. We did it again. We kept doing it. We built a little theater that didn't need tickets, where the audience of 2 was the exact right size. That became the shape of our days. 4 to 6 in the garden, a program of ridiculous brilliance. Mason choreographed quarrels between bus drivers and their conductors, so convincing I found myself wanting to referee. He taught me how to whoosh with him on the big spins. My chair a planet, his body a moon. He mimed being discovered by a talent scout made of smoke. He lost dance battles to invisible pigeons and declared himself honored to be defeated by such noble birds. I changed too. I started giving notes like a person who expected to be heard. Hold your breath before you fall. Count so I can clap on 3. When he missed a beat, I whistled through my teeth the way Mama used to, and he clutched his heart and said, Fierce director, be gentle with your star. Sometimes my toes tingled like a tiny bell a long way off. I learned to sit tall like the spine in an important book. When my arms got tired, I rested, then asked for more. The claps got stronger. The tap-tap turned crisp. On Thursday, I tried my own trick. While he pretended to be a robot with rusty knees, I clapped a rhythm we hadn't practiced. Tap, 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 tap. He froze mid-creak and turned, one eye big, one small, as if to say, Are you sure? I set my jaw and did it again. Tap, 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 tap. New code, he announced. Director requests variations. Approved. He mimed winding an invisible key in my back. Ready? Ready. We did it until the shadows lengthened and the guard coughed into his sleeve the way grown-ups do when they want to be polite about endings. After he left, the sound stayed. Even the fountain seemed to sing a little. The house, which had learned to swallow every bright thing, let some light sit on its tongue. Dr. Chen came the following week with his rolling case and his sensible shoes. He had glasses that always seemed to slide to the exact useful point on his nose. He tapped his tablet and smiled at me. It wasn't the kind of smile you give to a chart. It was the kind you give a person you expect to surprise you. How are we? He asked. He always said we as if the body were a group project. Busy, I said. I have rehearsals. Good. He wheeled his stool beside me, glanced out at the garden where Mason was talking to a bee as if negotiating a contract, and back at me. May I see your hands? He held them with careful thumbs on the back to feel the tendons work. Squeeze. I squeezed. Resist. I resisted. Elbows up. I lifted. We did all the things the way we always did, but this time I liked the game. I liked his surprised little hums. And trunk? He placed a hand in the safe space below my shoulder blade. Tall as you can, I stacked myself like blocks. The muscles along my ribs trembled, but did not quit. Again, he said, slowly. We did it again. I breathed the way Mason had taught me. Big in, laugh out, even though no one was joking yet. Dr. Chen glanced at his tablet and then at Daddy in the doorway. Her engagement is up, he said, and that's not just a mood word. She's initiating movement and sustaining it. The laughter is doing more than make her feel good. It's switching on circuits we want on. Because of dopamine? Daddy asked like a student who had done extra reading. Dopamine. Oxytocin. A general de-icing of the nervous system, Dr. Chen said. But let's not reduce it. The simple thing is, she's enjoying her body again. That's medicine. He turned to me. Show me your press. I placed my hands on the armrests, set my breath, counted quietly. 1, 2, 3, and lifted. Hips an inch, maybe 2. Enough for gravity to notice and complain. I held for 1, 2, 3, and lowered. Dr. Chen watched my face, not the numbers. Brave, he said softly, and smart. You don't rush. Again. We did 3 sets of 3. On the last one, my arms shook in a way that made both men look ready to catch me, which made me laugh, which made the set easier. Prescription, Dr. Chen said, tapping his tablet with the theatrical flourish of a magician producing doves. Daily joy tasks. I want 30 minutes minimum of... He ticked them off on his fingers. Call and response clapping, breath and count games, storytelling with movement, and one routine that makes you laugh so hard you forget to be careful for a second. That would be the siren, I said. The siren, he agreed solemnly. We'll add a metronome app. Start at 60 beats per minute, work up to 72. Let the beat carry the movement so your brain can rest from overthinking. He looked at Daddy. We keep standard therapy, but we stop worshiping it. The laughter isn't an extra, it's the engine. Daddy nodded, but his eyes were far away, a place where numbers live and make complicated families. He came back when Mason tripped on nothing and bowed to the window as if sensing his cue. Also, Dr. Chen added, lowering his voice, if the boy's a constant, involve him. Don't sanitize what's working. His name is Mason, I said. Mason, then. Dr. Chen wrote it on his tablet as if that made it official. We took the appointment outside. Dr. Chen set a soft belt around my torso and practiced lean and return with me, while Mason made faces to steal my worry. When my arms tired, Mason rested his cheek on the armrest and whispered, Our audience is very picky. She demands excellence. I pretended to fire him and then rehired him at a higher salary, payable in apple slices. On his way out, Dr. Chen stood for a moment with Daddy under the veranda shade. She'll plateau and push and plateau again, he said. You'll both think nothing is happening, and then something will. Don't marry the timetable. Marry the process. After he left, Daddy didn't go back to calls. He sat on the step and watched us invent new nonsense. He laughed, real laughter that came from the part of his chest he usually reserves for breathing. That night I slept heavy and sweet. When dreams came, they smelled like grass. Mason and I built a show catalog, the Rosebush Apology, the Pigeon Negotiations, the Robot with Feelings. We rehearsed Left Hands Only Day and The Very Serious Inspector Who Can't Stop Sneezing. I started reading him line notes in my best grown-up voice. Bigger at the end. The pause before the slip is the joke. He saluted me with a broom like it was a cane. Director, he said one afternoon, I have composed a tragic poem about not enough soup. May I perform it? You may. It was very tragic. I laughed until my stomach hurt. During Wheel of Fortune, the one where I practiced slow spins while he announced prizes like a completely imaginary toaster, a low mechanical buzz threaded the air. We both looked up. Above the hedges, something small hovered, light blinking like a lazy heartbeat. Look, Mason whispered, a robot bee. The guard by the gate lifted his walkie, said something short, and watched the sky with the expression adults get when they're pretending not to mind. The drone drifted sideways, then higher, then out of view. We waited for it to come back. It didn't. Probably a neighbor, I said, and believed it for almost 9 seconds. When the garden emptied and the windows turned to mirrors, Daddy climbed the staircase to the landing where Mama's portrait waited. The lamps made a crown of light around her hair. He stood with his hands in his pockets, a boy visiting the principal. I'm late to the lesson, he told her quietly, but I'm in class. He smiled at himself, at the foolishness of talking to oil and canvas, then sobered. I tried to buy my way out of the ache, he said. I'm sorry. He looked down at the banister polished by other hands, other years. Thank you for sending us a dancer. He didn't touch the frame. He never did. He nodded to her like a pact and went to his office, where a new habit had begun. 10 minutes of reading, not the day's markets, but the small account book in which he now wrote down the moments that mattered. Today he wrote, 4:17 p.m. Lily set new rhythm. Mason followed. Laughter loud, arms steady, tap, tap, tap. He closed the book with his palm and felt something under it that didn't belong to numbers. He sat there until the room felt full again. On Saturday, the drone returned. It hummed above the cedar like an opinion. Mason waved at it. "We accept sponsorships from friendly robots," he announced. The guard muttered into his radio. Mrs. Vale stepped closer to the veranda's edge with her dish towel like a truce flag. We kept playing. That is what children do when adults smell weather. At dinner, Mrs. Vale carried in a covered plate and in the same motion slid a small box onto the side table with the discretion of a card sharp. "Kitchen sent extra," she said. I knew what it was without opening it. A pair of inexpensive canvas sneakers, gray to match the socks. She didn't mention sizes. She didn't have to. Her eyes held mine a second, the housekeeper's version of a curtsy, and moved on. When Mason left, the sneakers were gone too, and his steps sounded different on the gravel, softer somehow and braver. The guard said, "See you Monday, buddy," as if the word had always been waiting for a body to belong to. I slept like a person who had used her body for something it liked. The world did not sleep. On Sunday morning, the first text came to Daddy's phone from a number that likes to send trouble without introductions. "You seen this?" It contained a link he didn't open. 5 minutes later, Harper called. Daddy let it ring out. 5 minutes after that, Mrs. Vale knocked, which she never does unless a casserole is in danger. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice careful, "perhaps you should look." She held her own phone like a hot plate. On its screen, a gossip site that makes money by pretending it isn't hungry. City Whisper, exclusive, Hawthorne Air and Street Kid. Inside, a bright blue reader with cartoon pigeons on the cover and big words beneath. Run, cat, hop, dog. "Kitchen sent extra," she murmured, eyes on the page. I wanted to take the book and also hide it behind my back, like I did with kind things. "When?" I asked. "After your supper, 10 minutes, no tests. We let the letters come when they're ready." She tucked the book under the tray as if hiding treasure from pirates. "And if you ever tire of soup," she said, "say so. Pride is expensive. Honesty is cheaper." I almost told her everything. Bridges and stormwater and the time I danced in the rain so I wouldn't cry. Instead, I stood and did the very serious inspector who can't stop sneezing until she rolled her eyes to keep from laughing in a way that meant, "Stay." We were still laughing when a shadow lengthened across the lawn and stopped short of our circle. Edward Hawthorne stood there, jacket folded over one arm, that careful look on his face like a person stepping from a boat to a dock that might be slippery. "Mason," he said. "Sir? Walk with me?" He didn't say it like a question. I didn't mind. We took the path along the roses. The white ones smell like water and the red ones like secrets. He tucked his hands in his pockets the way men do when they're not sure whether to speak with them. "I saw the thing online," he said finally, like the words were stones he had to place exactly. "The photo." "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know the robot bee was a gossip bee." A line almost, but not quite, became a smile at the corner of his mouth. "It shouldn't matter. It does." He looked out at the hedge as if it were a crowd. "There will be opinions." I waited. I have learned there is always something behind the thing people say. "Harper thinks this jeopardizes a hospital wing," he said. "Donors like to imagine they're buying certainty. A photograph of uncertainty spooks them." I thought of certainty, a roof that doesn't leak, a bed with only one owner. "Do you want me to go?" I asked, so he wouldn't have to be the one to say it if he did. He stopped. "I don't want you to be hurt," he said, and the words surprised both of us. "I don't want my daughter to be hurt. And I don't want to live in a house where the loudest voice is fear." We stood there a moment inside the decision he didn't make out loud. "Tell me about you," he said, turning the conversation gently like a plate. "Not the photo, the boy." People don't usually ask. They guess. Or they give me stories they can more easily forgive. So I gave him a real one. The short version, it takes 3 bridges to learn. I don't remember before the bus station much, I said. I remember the color of a dress and a voice that said, hold my hand. But maybe that's from a movie I watched through a shop window. The women at the market fed me when I was small enough to hide in the pepper baskets. When I got longer, they still fed me, but with eyes that said, grow up fast. At night, the bridge sings. When it rains, you tuck your knees in and pretend you're a folded umbrella. When hunger bites, you move. If you just sit still, it chews deeper. When you dance, it forgets where it put its teeth. He didn't interrupt. He didn't give me a sad face like a coin. He just listened like he was writing it down where his money couldn't get to it. Why do you dance for us? He asked. Because she laughed, I thought. Because the first time it happened, I felt the city get quiet in a kind way. Because when Lily claps, my bones stop arguing with each other. I said, because it feels like breathing where the air's good. He nodded once, slow. I used to think the point of a room was what it held, he said. My wife, Grace, thought the point of a room was what it made possible. We came to a bench and he sat, not looking at me, looking at the place where the lawn dropped into shadow. She had a way, he said. We were in a boardroom once where every person at the table wanted credit for a donation. Names on plaques, a press wall with the right logos. Grace listened. Then she asked the intern, trembling in the corner, invisible to everyone but her, to tell us about the patient who waited the longest for care that week. The room changed shape. The intern's voice built a story with a person inside it. When the intern finished, Grace pulled all the chairs into a circle. It was still a boardroom, but for the next hour it worked like a place where mercy was the agenda. He pressed his hand once over his heart and let it fall again. I forgot how to do that, he said. I bought tables when what we needed was a circle. I don't know what to say to a sentence like that. So I said the only thing that seemed true. Your house is learning. He let out a breath that made room for another. So is its owner. We walked back to Lily. She had designed a new routine for me called The Detective Who Finds His Heart in His Shoe. She made me rehearse the last reveal 5 times because it had to be exactly the right kind of surprised. Edward watched us with his sleeves rolled, his tie loose. For a second, he looked like the picture of a boy I'd expect Grace to fall in love with. Harper arrived after dusk, slipping along the veranda like Winter. He didn't bother to sit. He opened his portfolio the way a priest opens a book. We're bleeding, he said, dispensing numbers as if they were diagnoses. 2 anchor donors have pressed pause on the rehab wing. Another is concerned about messaging. We need to guide the narrative. I've drafted language. Hawthorne Foundation partners with Innovative Youth Arts Rehab, pilot program under careful supervision. See how I reframed it as your initiative? Edward's jaw set. It's not an initiative, he said. It's a boy with a name. Harper's mouth moved like he'd bitten pepper. Edward, you're a steward of more than your sentimentality. If the board thinks you've lost control of optics, they'll find someone who hasn't. What would control look like to you? Edward asked. Distance, Harper said. A statement about boundaries, a photo of Lily with a professionally vetted therapist, a nice, sterile shot. The public doesn't understand nuance. Give them a clean image. A clean image. I thought of the drone looking for angles where our faces didn't look like faces. I understand nuance fine, Edward said. So do my donors, if they're mine. Harper's eyes cooled by a degree. He closed the portfolio like a verdict. I'll schedule the call with legal, he said, and with media. For your protection, Edward. After he left, the long door breathed closed behind him, and all the lamps seemed warmer in relief. That night after supper, Mrs. Vale sat me at the kitchen table like a student who had wandered into a kind school by accident. We'll mind our own business, she said, meaning the business of letters. No one can take these from you. She drew a big A and a small a. This one stands up straight. This one sits. She made me say words that begin with it. Apple, answer, alive. She made me read run, cat, and when I said ran, cat, she let me finish the line before she corrected me, because dignity is also a lesson. Good, she said after 10 minutes. Enough. Tomorrow we coax the bee out of hiding. Before I left, she pushed a folded sheet my way. Kitchen sent extra, she said. It was not food. It was a schedule in her looping script. Mon, siren, slow. Twos, robot, blink, hold. Wed, detective, shoe heart. Thurs, fire feet, fall at N. Fry, director choice. At the bottom, she'd drawn a little rose next to my name, as if the house itself were signing. The guard walked me to the gate. Careful tomorrow, he said. They'll be sniffing. Who? People who like pictures more than people. I slept at the bridge with the book tucked inside my shirt, the page corners prickling like new teeth. The rain didn't come. The truck sang. I practiced the shapes of letters in the air with my finger, like drawing on glass. By morning, the picture had done what pictures do when they taste attention. It multiplied. On one side of the internet, strangers wrote like neighbors who'd borrowed sugar. This made me cry. Love is medicine. Bless that boy. Some added emojis like confetti, which I've learned is how phones pretend to throw a party. On the other side, people arrange words like knives. Where are his parents? This is reckless. Rich people using street kids for PR, which made me laugh out loud under the bridge. Because if anyone's PR my face is doing, it's for Joy, and Joy's budget is terrible. By noon, a hashtag was doing push-ups. She shears street boy in the manor. Half the posts felt like hugs. Half felt like eyes that never learned to be kind. I almost didn't go, because sometimes the best way to dodge a storm is to lie down and become a rock. Then I remembered how Lily's fingers sounded when they call me. Tap, 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 and the way the guard says, buddy, like my name grew a jacket. I stood up. If you move, the weight moves too. At the gate, the guard already knew what the world had decided to call me today. You trending, he grinned. Don't let it make you stupid. Yes, sir. We danced our program. Lily's notes were ruthless and perfect. Hold the blink. Fall later. Be surprised better. Edward clapped off beat like a man learning a new language and not minding if he sounds wrong for a while. When I left, the guard's radio crackled with a message he didn't want me to hear. Press at north entrance. 2 vans. Drone up. Legal wants names. He rolled his eyes conspiratorially. Legal always wants names, he said. We prefer people. We bumped fists through the bars. I stepped into the city that loves to talk about you instead of to you, mouth already forming jokes for later, so the ache would not win. Behind me, the house stood up straighter than yesterday. Online, the split widened, admiration running shoulder to shoulder with suspicion, the hashtag flexing its muscles as if it had a body. Street boy in the manor. I tried the words quietly, the way you try on a coat. It didn't fit, but Lily's laughter did, and the rhythm of her fingers, and the way Edward looked at me when he said my name without shortening it. The world hummed like a drone above a cedar tree, watching, wanting. Inside the gate, we were busy making a room into a circle. The afternoon arrived warm and uncomplicated, the kind of day that would have passed for ordinary in another life. The garden held its breath in leaf rustle and fountain chatter. At 4, the side gate clicked. Mason came in at a springy half-run, sneakers gray as the socks that had preceded them, past lanyards slapping his chest like applause he'd borrowed from the future. Lily waited in the shade with her notebook open to a page of stern director's scribbles. She lifted it like a contract. We begin with the siren, she announced, but slower. Then we try the new detective ending, and then... Her eyes flicked up at me, bright and steady. We'll see. I felt the old reflex stir, the urge to manage outcomes with money and meetings. I put both hands in my pockets and let the reflex pass. Proceed, I said, and took the chair on the veranda steps, close enough to be within the circle, far enough to honor the stage. Mason cupped his hands and made the kind of apologetic siren that might stop to tie its shoe. Lily clapped in their code, tap, 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 then countered with a wobbling new variant. He echoed it with steps, heel-toe pause, their faces already grinning the unguarded way that makes adults believe in weather. They moved through the program like 2 conspirators, the pigeon negotiations. Mason bowed to an invisible commissioner of birds. The robot with feelings. Lily made him hold the blink 3 full beats longer. And the very serious inspector, whose heart, after 3 failed attempts, finally turned up in his shoe, with a triumph that made all 3 of us laugh too loud for a house that once worshipped quiet. At some point, the laughter shifted timbre. It wasn't louder, it was rooted. Lily's shoulders stacked themselves on purpose. The chair turns grew clean. The fingers that had learned to wait started to ask. "Ready?" she said to no one and to herself. "For what?" I asked before I could stop the father in me. "For what we practiced," she said evenly, as if we'd all agreed while I slept. Mason swept a space clear on the grass with a flourish, then caught himself and came to her side. "Director," he said softly, "call the count." She placed her hands on the armrests, palms warm, elbows close. Dr. Chen's method, her rhythm. She looked at Mason. He nodded once and exaggerated a breath, big in, laugh out, to make her smile at the very thing she was afraid of. "One," she whispered. Her triceps held. Her chest rose. "Two." Her torso lifted a fraction. The chair complained. She didn't. "Three." She pushed. Her hips rose an inch. "Two." Time peeled its skin back and stared. For a heartbeat that lasted 3 counts in a decade, nothing in the garden dared move. A bee veered away mid-flight. The fountain forgot its next syllable. The guards stilled in the hedges like carved men in a chapel. I heard my own breath at the same moment I realized I'd stopped taking any. Lily held, face bright, arms shaking with the clean truth of effort. 1, 2, 3, and lowered herself with a control that made pride and fear switch seats inside my ribs. Silence fell, the holy kind that answers prayer without arguing about the God. In that silence, we all searched for the first rightful sound. Mason found it. "Champion," he whispered, too reverent for the word to sound small. Lily's mouth opened on a wet laugh that became a sob that became the kind of smile humans invented to carry more than one feeling at once. She looked up at me like a child and a general. "Daddy," she said, wonder and instruction in equal parts. "Did you see?" I fell to one knee in the grass. The world blurred at the edges and then sharpened. "I saw," I said. "I saw everything." Heaven resumed. The fountain remembered water. The bee recommitted to its tiny errands. Lily pressed her palms flat and lifted again, not as high, not as long, and lowered with a victory that cared nothing for numbers. We didn't cheer like sports fans. We laughed like a family, realizing a room we'd locked had a window all along. Mrs. Vale arrived 5 minutes later with a tray that pretended to be regular. Bowls of soup, sliced apples, soft bread. But she had tucked paper napkins into the rims like celebratory flags. And on the side plate, she'd set 2 strawberries with their green hats still on, which, coming from our kitchen in mid-season, qualified as her version of fireworks. "Kitchen sent extra," she said, eyes kind and busy. She set the tray low and then, as if checking a thread on the hem of the moment, brushed Lily's shoulder with the back of her fingers. "Good," she murmured, the word full of a decade of prayer. We ate on the grass. Or rather, Mason ate like a boy and tried to look like a guest. I dipped bread and pretended I hadn't forgotten how. Lily broke her apple slices into precise halves and tested the limits of telling a story while chewing. "On the 3rd count," she said, the chair squeaked like it was worried, but I wasn't. "On the 3rd count," Mason corrected. The chair begged for mercy, but the director denied its petition. We laughed. I laughed. Not the careful public chuckle I've learned for panels and galas. Not the relieved laugh of a man whose team saved a deal at 4:59. A laugh that traveled my sternum and broke open the locked room where Grace used to keep the good things. If happiness had a scent, that hour smelled like warm bread and cut grass in the mild varnish of a wooden spoon. When the bowls were empty and the strawberry crowns sat like tiny party waste on the plate, Lily turned her chair a quarter, and in that small arc of motion I saw every city I'd ever bought and every mistake I'd ever defended fall into their proper sizes. "Again?" she asked, looking at both of us as if one might veto the vote. "Again," I said. "Again," Mason said, already standing. They ran the sequence. Her press wasn't as high. The hold wasn't as long. I wanted to be greedy and was not. We stopped where Dr. Chen would stop. I wanted to call him as if miracles required notarization. He called me. "Report," he said, voice cheerful and braced, as if returning my own tone to me across a net. "You'll want to see for yourself," I said, and did not trust my ability to sentence the event in a way that wouldn't embarrass it. He arrived an hour later with his rolling case, and his patient optimism. We met him at the veranda stairs like altar boys greeting a saint with sensible shoes. "Show me," he said to Lily, and stepped into her space like a person invited. She placed her hands the way she had, breathed the way Mason taught her, counted under her breath just loud enough for us to hear and feel included. She lifted. Not as high as the first time. Long enough. Dr. Chen didn't look at the angle. He watched her face. He timed the hold against the rhythm of her courage. When she sat back, he nodded once. A tiny bow. "Keep doing exactly this," he said. "Don't chase the number. Chase the feeling that makes the number possible. 2 sets, 3 reps, once a day today. If the arms feel heavy tomorrow, make the work smaller and the laughter bigger." "Is there anything else?" I asked, desperate the way only the humbled are. "Yes," he said. "Celebrate. Then stop and let the body write the memory while she sleeps." He tapped his tablet. "And we schedule something careful." He glanced at me over the rim of his glasses. "A standing trial. Not tomorrow. Not this week. Soon. Timetable to be earned. Not bullied." "Soon," Lily repeated, tasting the word like a berry. She looked at Mason. He grinned and kissed the back of his own hand elaborately, the way a ham of an actor thinks a great line. Dr. Chen packed his tools and then unpacked one more thing I didn't expect. A small metronome app open on his phone. He set it at 60 beats per minute and put it on the arm of the chair. "Let it carry some of the work," he said. "Brains get tired, rhythm doesn't." We watched the light blink. Mason matched it with a tap of his sneaker toe. Lily matched it with the drum of her fingers. I matched it by letting a room I used to control fill with timing I did not make. After he left, evening laid itself down on the lawn, and the hedges became a soft border between our lives and the city's appetites. The guard by the gate chatted with a gardener in the low theater of men who have decided to call each other by first names. Somewhere above, a drone hummed and didn't linger. I fed the security system a request for stillness, and it tried its best. Night pulled the house into long shadows. I walked the corridor past the landing, where Grace kept me honest. I stopped as I always did, and did not say aloud the things I had said earlier, because the house had already heard them, and I didn't want to make Joy feel second-guessed. Lily slept early, the metronome's soft tick-tick under the blanket a lullaby so faint it might have been memory. Mason left with a new routine note from his director and a half loaf wrapped in cloth. The guard gave him a salute that somehow didn't mock anything. Mrs. Vale wiped the last glass, turned the kitchen lamp to the setting she calls mercy, locked the back door with a click that announces we have done what we can for the day. In my study, the security console pulsed with its own reliable nervous system. The daily log glowed. Visitor pass, Mason Brooks, closed. Perimeter sweep, clear. Media presence, minimal. The kind of reassuring fiction machines are good at. An email icon nudged my attention. From intake, cityfamilyservices.gov. Subject, notice of report received. I assumed a solicitation until I saw the words that make any house with a child become a courthouse. Anonymous complaint submitted. I opened it. The template was designed to be calm. "We are writing to inform you that our office has received an anonymous report alleging potential child endangerment related to an unvetted trespasser on private property in proximity to a disabled minor." Phrases arranged themselves into a shape I recognized from boardrooms where the stakes were money and could be lowered by calling it risk. This was different. The words had edges. "Our duty is to make contact within 72 hours to determine whether a safety assessment is necessary." Below that, checkboxes ticked by a stranger's hand. Trespasser, unknown juvenile. Disabled minor present. Guardian aware? Unknown. Potential neglect via access, unspecified. I read it twice, then once more, because disbelief often dresses as literacy. I wanted to be angry at the facelessness. I wanted to be angry at Harper, at the drone, at the neighbors who wanted to eat my life as gossip and call it dinner. Anger came easily. It was not useless. It also wasn't the tool we needed. I forwarded the email to my counsel with the briefest sentence of my life: "I will handle first contact," and set the phone face down as if that could turn down consequence. I went to Lily's door and stood long enough to hear the metronome under her sleep. Tick tick, like a modest clock practicing. At the window, the garden was a square of dark cloth stitched with lighter thread. The hedges were the hem. Out beyond them, engines and appetite. My own heart matched her metronome for a while, and then stubbornly took up a different tempo. In the guard booth, a radio crackled, then cleared. Downstairs, a printer reset itself and hummed. On the console, a new alert winked into being. Bureaucratic as dust. Social services intake scheduled. Contact attempt pending. I picked up the folder I'd begun keeping for the impossible. Mason, Lily, progress. I slid a paper in the pocket. Dr. Chen's standing trial note, today's date, 3 check marks beside the word, press-ups, and closed it. Outside, a car idled a little too long at the curb before moving on. Inside, the house waited, shoulders squared, as a stranger's form letter set its feet on our path. The holy silence had given us a miracle. The world as it does had filed it. They came in the morning with the politeness of paperwork. Officer Dunn wore a uniform that made every room feel narrower. Beside him, the social worker, Ms. Rivera, held a leather folio against her ribs the way people cradle something they can't let drop. We met in the study with the balcony doors open to the garden. The fountain kept talking, as if unaware that the house had become a small courthouse. "Thank you for receiving us," Ms. Rivera said. "This is a routine contact following a community report." Anonymous, I did not say. Cowardly, I did not add. "We understand there's a minor who visits your daughter," she continued. "We'll need to ask about conditions of access, supervision, and any known history." "His name is Mason," I said. Names first. "He comes daily from 4 to 6. Garden only. He has a visitor pass." I slid the printed log across the desk. "He eats before he leaves." Officer Dunn scanned the entry, eyes flicking to the balcony, as if expecting trouble to announce itself in bright colors. "And you're aware there's been press interest?" "I'm aware," I said. "Miss Gray, Rivera's questions were precise and clean. Was the gate monitored?" "Yes." "Were valuables secured?" "We don't live in a museum." "Had the boy ever been inside?" "Once, escorted to the powder room by the side door." "Were there background checks?" I almost answered with the history I actually trusted. Lily's laugh, the new rhythm in her hands. Instead, I said, "We're building what we can." "May we observe the interaction today?" she asked. I almost said no. Then I remembered that fear had been the loudest voice in this house for too long. "You may." My phone buzzed on the desk. Harper. I silenced it. He called again. I turned the device face down, the way a man closes the lid on his own bad habit. At noon, Harper stopped pretending to be a phone and arrived in person. He did not sit. "Let me be blunt," he said. "Distance the boy until this is resolved. Optics, Edward, optics. You cannot have social services on your lawn and an unknown minor performing tricks for your disabled child. It reads as exploitation, however noble you feel." Ms. Rivera did not flinch. "Our office doesn't comment on optics," she said. "We assess safety." "And I protect a hospital wing and a foundation," Harper shot back. "Perhaps we all should remember our jobs." "My job," I said, "is my daughter." He exhaled through his nose the way men do when they think you've failed a class they designed. "Legal will advise a pause," he said. "I'm advising it now." "You've been heard," I said. He understood that as dismissal and withdrew, leaving an expensive aftershave and a colder room behind him. At 3:58, the side gate clicked. Mason came up the path with his lanyard and the little straightness he wears when he's trying to be equal to a moment. He saw the uniforms, then me, and lifted his chin halfway. "Good afternoon," he said, to Ms. Rivera. "Ma'am," to Dunn. A careful nod. "Sir." "This is Mason," I said. "The simplest defense I know." Ms. Rivera smiled with the front of her face and the back of her eyes. "Hello, Mason. I'm here to make sure everybody's safe and well. Would it be all right if I watched you work? And then we talk a little?" "Okay," he said, looking at Lily, who waited under the tree with her notebook and a courage that made my throat tight. "Director?" he asked her. "Do we proceed?" "We proceed," she answered, voice even. He danced the siren slower, because she'd asked for slower. He did the robot and held the blink for the full 3 beats. He bowed to the rosebush so ceremoniously even Officer Dunn smiled despite himself. Lily clapped their code, tap, 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 and the garden absorbed it like medicine. After, Ms. Rivera sat with Mason at the edge of the grass. No clipboard. "Tell me about you," she said gently. He told her the bridge sings at night, and the market women keep boys like him from disappearing. He told her he dances because hunger loosens its grip when you move. He did not beg for anything. He did not perform a tragedy. He simply told the truth to someone, trained to hear it and not break. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked. He looked toward Lily. "Yes," he said, then to me. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded. "And when you leave?" He made the small shrug boys make when they have learned not to ask the world to be different. "I know where the dry places are." Officer Dunn stepped in with a cop's reflex. "There are shelters." "I know," Mason said politely, the way one declines a coat that doesn't fit. "Sometimes they fill. Sometimes the bridge has a place for me." Miss Rivera handed him a card with a number on it. "Call if you want," she said. "I won't be offended if you don't." They left after an hour with phrases that should have reassured me. No immediate hazard, continued observation, and a promise to follow up that sounded like a shadow. I walked them out and returned to the study. The room had that post-visit quiet of a space that has performed decency and is now tired. I went to the sideboard to wind my watch, an old habit I'd never lost. My hand found the silver tray, empty. I frowned, slid books aside, lifted a stack of papers. Nothing. The watch is a small, expensive history, a gift from Grace on a birthday that feels like a different species of day. I checked the drawer. Empty. On instinct, I pressed the intercom. "Rosales," I said, "have you seen my watch? The silver." "No, sir," came the guard's voice. "Do you want me to check?" "Never mind," I said too fast. "We'll find it." I told myself to let it go. Then Harper's voice uncoiled in my ear. "Optics. Unknown minor." I hated that the thought arrived with his cologne. At 4:50, I saw Mason looking at the sideboard as if it were a small museum he didn't intend to visit. I hated my next sentence before it left my mouth. "Mason," I said, and I made my voice gentle to hide its failure. "Did you see a watch here earlier?" He straightened. "A watch?" "Silver. On this tray." I opened my hands the way men do when pretending to be casual. His eyes went to mine, then to Lily, then back. "No, sir," he said. He didn't add the obvious. "I know what you're asking." "Of course," I said, already ashamed. "Of course." He smiled, but it was the careful version he uses when rain is coming and none of us control the sky. We finished the session under a thinner kind of light. When it was time to go, he carried his bowl and the folded cloth of bread to the terrace and placed them exactly where they always go, as if to say, "See? See?" He turned to me. "Sir," he said quietly, "maybe I should not come until the questions stop." "No," I started. "That isn't—" He looked at Lily. She sat very still, hands pressed flat to keep from trembling. "I don't want her to be in trouble because of me," he said. "If people come with more papers, they shouldn't see me." "Please don't," Lily said. It wasn't loud, but it was more dangerous than any shout. "Please don't stop." He swallowed. "Just for a little," he lied to her. To me, to himself, the way the brave lie when they think their absence is a kind of protection. "Just a little." He bowed to the rose bush without humor and walked to the gate. He did not run. Running makes adults nervous. He walked like a boy who has practiced leaving without making a scene. When the latch clicked, the house sagged. I stood in the study, hating the tray, the empty circle it made. I moved a paperweight. Nothing. I crouched to peer under the console. Dust. I told myself the object did not matter. I told myself the story I had almost told about a boy mattered more. It didn't help. At 8, the house heard a sound it had not heard in months. Lily crying in the small, angry voice grief uses when it is afraid it will go hoarse. I went to her room with the panic of a man discovering he has 2 hands and both are clumsy. When you leave, you don't look back. Looking back makes the guard wonder if he missed something. Looking back makes the ache take shape. I cut through the alley behind the florists, where the air always smells like weddings and broken promises. The drone hummed somewhere, bored with us, hungry for a different angle. I passed the soup kitchen and didn't go in because kindness would make me stay. At the bus park, the evening sang its metal song. Mama Nkechi saw my face and didn't ask. She pressed a donut into my palm and tapped my knuckles twice the way she did when I was too small for the world, and she decided we would argue about that later. You go where? She said. Nowhere, I said. Bridge. Ah. Her mouth did the thing older people's mouths do when they taste a truth they cannot fix. You carry that book? I patted my shirt. The pigeons on the cover made a small wall against my ribs. Yes. She nodded toward the sky where the city pretends to be kind at sunset. God sees, she said. And I wanted to joke that I hope he also tips. I didn't. I waved, because if I spoke, the leaving would shake too much. The bridge felt taller than yesterday. I found my spot by the pillar where the wind forgets to bite. I opened the book to hop, dog, and sounded the letters in a whisper that wouldn't fight the trucks. When it got too dark, I closed it and lay on my side. I tried to make my bones quiet. I tried not to imagine a little hand tapping a rhythm I could no longer hear. Tap, 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 the air said anyway, because memory is rude. The city exhaled. I kept still, because stillness sometimes keeps you safe. I promised myself I'd stay away 2 days. 2 is not a lifetime. I didn't count the way 2 can become a hallway. I thought I had learned how to breathe. I forgot that breath is a thing that can break. It started small. The house felt too big, as if all the walls had stepped back and left me alone on a stage I didn't audition for. I practiced the press-up the way Dr. Chen said, 2 sets, 3 reps, but my hands felt like someone else's. On the second rep I failed, and on the third I failed, and suddenly failure had a mouth and teeth. The air got thin. My fingers remembered shaking. My chest forgot math. The metronome ticked from the nightstand, and for a second it was a clock, and then it was a countdown, and then it was a hammer. Daddy came before I called. He has learned the sound of my body. He knelt. Breathe with me, he said. But we both heard how scared he was to be the teacher. It did not work. It felt like he was asking me to swim in a glass of water. I made the small sound kids make when they want to be younger than they are. I can't, I said, which is one of the bravest sentences, and also the one I hate most. Then Mrs. Vale was there with a towel that smelled like the laundry line, and a face she only wears when the oven timer and the baby and the doorbell go off at once. She clicked the metronome slower, slow enough to crown a snail. Tick, tick. Tap with me, she said, taking my hand, and she tapped the rhythm Mason taught us. Tap, 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 tap. I matched it, but my taps were messy, and then they were better, and then they were mine. Daddy counted with us, too loud at first, then softer. The rhythm got taller. My lungs sat down. The glass of water got bigger. When the panic passed, it left the sticky sadness it always leaves. Like a party when you remember the guest who couldn't come. Daddy didn't talk. He sat on the floor beside my chair and leaned his head against the wheel like a man who's taken off his armor and doesn't know what to do with his shoulders. Tomorrow, he said, to the carpet, to the air, to himself. Tomorrow I'll fix it. I wanted to say we don't fix boys, we find them. I didn't, because my mouth was tired. I dozed to the sound of the metronome and Daddy's promises, which sounded like footsteps in another room looking for a coat. After Lily slept, I went back to the study to stare at the insult of the empty tray. Anger is a tool. Tonight it felt like a toy. I moved the papers again, opened the drawer again, went to the cabinet because repetition sometimes sedates the mind. A man learns his own foolishness in the third pass. When I nudged the heavy chair back to search behind it, I heard a soft knock. Wood against wood. I leaned down, heart suddenly stupid. There at the baseboard, a thin crescent of steel winked from the shadow where the chair leg had rolled the watch and let it hide. I cursed softly, at myself, at gravity, at the exact shape of the thought I had let sit in my eyes when I asked a child if he'd seen a thing that was never his. I freed the watch with my thumb and it bit me. Sharp, earned, because metal has its own sense of justice. I held it in my palm and felt a rush of relief that shamed me. I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of Lily's room. She slept on her side, one hand fisted near her mouth, the metronome now only a blinking light, the sound off as if Mercy had switched channels. I thought of Mason on the bridge, lying very still to keep the night from noticing him. I texted Rosales. Meet me at the gate at 6. The bus park first, then the bridge, then the soup kitchen. Yes, sir, he replied, the kind of yes that belongs to more than a salary. On my way back to the study, I passed Grace. You would have found him before the second apology, I told the portrait. I am late to everything that matters. In the morning, we went hunting. I wore the only jacket I own that doesn't look like it came with a speech. The city at 6 is a different animal. Sincere, half-dressed. We started at the bus park. Mama Nkechi wiped her hands on her apron and squinted at me like a person deciding whether to waste words on a rich man. He was here, she said, before I had to prove I could speak. Last night, he carried a book like a secret. Where? I asked. After? She pointed with her chin. Bridge. He is like rain. He doesn't fall the same way twice. We checked the soup kitchen. No. The underpass near the station. No. The alcove by the shuttered hardware store. No. Boys nodded at Rosales in the universal language of men who wear badges and try not to make trouble. They shook their heads at me. At the bridge, the city sang its morning song, trucks throating, rails calling. We searched by the pillar where, I would later learn, he curls himself into the shape of his smallest sadness. We found a piece of bread, a paper cup, a scuff of shoe at the real estate level. We found everything but the boy. By 9, I was late to 3 meetings I had already canceled in my mind. By 10, I had a list of places where children disappear without malice, which is somehow worse. By 11, I understood the arithmetic of my failure. I had let a stranger's form letter and a missing watch make a child remove himself from my daughter's life. I had mistaken caution for care. At noon, Ms. Rivera called to say she'd be by later to schedule the next visit. And, she added carefully, we received an inquiry from another office, a separate complaint, possibly related to, she paused, choosing the least cruel word, public attention. Thank you, I said. Please come. I returned to the house with my jacket over my arm and a silence in my chest that was not the old silence. It was the kind that announces a decision and leaves you to catch up. I told Lily I was still looking. She nodded as if she were older than both of us. At 3, I stood in the garden, where we had invented days and tried to memorize the exact angle the sun makes at 4 o'clock when a boy walks through a gate, and the world chooses a better story. At 4, the gate did not click. At 5, the guard's radio crackled with the kinds of sentences radios like, short, official, bloodless. None of them contained the word found. As the light thinned, I opened the study door, and the house gave me back my watch's soft reprimand and the smell of paper and soap. On the console, the drone feed flickered past. 3 angles of nothing. On the desk, the folder waited, Mason, Lily. Progress. A title that mocked me. The city outside did what cities do. It swallowed the vulnerable with the efficiency of a mouth that has learned to chew while talking. I closed the balcony doors, then opened them again because I'm learning not to lock a window when what we need is air. In the hallway, a floorboard announced Mrs. Vale's last rounds. Upstairs, a metronome ticked steady, stubborn. I set the watch back on its tray like a confession. Mason was somewhere under the great humming body of the city. He had done the brave, wrong thing to protect us. I had let him. And the bridge, indifferent and constant, sang. Dawn came in a plain shirt, no tie. The city yawned itself awake. The house waited for orders. I gave it 1. We are leaving. I texted the board chair at 6:12 a.m. I won't be at the merger signing. Proceed without me or postpone. The reply tried to be neutral. Postpone recommended. Optics, Harper called. I let the call die. Then he texted 3 words he thought could still command me. $1 billion deal. I put the phone face down on the hall table beneath Grace's portrait. She looked like someone who already knew what I'd chosen. Rosales met me at the gate with a thermos and a map in his head. Bus park first, he said. Then the bridge. He eats at the soup kitchen when he's not proud. Today, I said, we're luckier than pride. The car moved into a morning that still smelled like night. Wet concrete, frying dough, a rumor of rain. The bus park was a living machine. Engines coughing, vendors calling prices like prayer. Men with newspapers under their arms pretending to know the day before it started. I stepped out of the car and the air changed around me the way a room changes when a rich man enters. I hated the reflex I could not yet unlearn. Mama Nkichi saw me first. She narrowed her eyes the way a woman does when checking a mango for bruises. You, she said, not unkindly, and wiped her hands on an apron gone pale at the hip. You lost something. Yes, I said. A boy. Mason. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. You found trouble and now you want to keep it. She lifted her chin toward the east. Bridge after dark. Soup kitchen before. Sometimes the station. He passes like rain. Did he say anything? I asked. When he left. She studied my face like it might confess without my help. He looked like a boy pretending not to be hurt. That sentence landed in my ribs and knocked on every locked door. If he comes, I said, tell him his director left a note. You made me brave. Please come home. Director? She echoed, and her mouth softened. Good. The girl has a title. We moved. The soup kitchen opened its doors like a church between sermons. Men and women filed past with the humility that hunger forces on the confident. I stood with a coffee I didn't drink and asked the volunteers if they'd seen him. Some shook their heads. Some brightened at his name. One man said, he dances outside when it rains. Says moving keeps the cold from choosing him. He said it with the envy of someone who'd forgotten how to make the body mean something. The bridge was a hymn written by trucks. We walked the span, and then its belly. The underpass, pillars fat as old money. Rosales led, speaking in the dialect of men who have learned to be protective without declaring it. We found the sign of him, a paper cup, a scuff on concrete, a shoe print too small to be any of ours. We did not find the boy. By noon, the city had accepted our search and returned to its own business. I called the house. Command center, Mrs. Vale answered, qualified for the promotion by a lifetime of quiet management. How is she? I asked. Counting, she said. Then resting, then counting. She lowered her voice. She recorded something. I'll send it. A message arrived a minute later. I stepped into the shade of a shuttered stall and pressed play. Hi, Lily said to my phone, steady as a small lighthouse. It's me, your director. I want you to know I did not authorize your leaving. You made me brave. Please come home. We have rehearsal. Also, the rosebush misses you. I leaned against the metal shutter and let foolishness fall out of me in a long breath. 3 men passed, laughing at something none of us would remember tomorrow. I wished I'd been stupid sooner. We kept moving. Markets, curb edges, the underside of a stair. I learned to look down where a body might try to disappear without failing at it. At the station, the noise was a kind of weather. Announcements bled into arguments. Pigeons made a living out of human attention span. A woman with a baby on her back saw my suit and shook her head because hunger hates a uniform. Sir, Rosales said, laying a hand on my arm. At the edge of the concourse, a knot of boys tightened into a small storm. Angry, protective, unpracticed. I saw a flicker of familiar gray sneaker, then the line of a jaw I knew. Mason was in the middle, smaller than the shouting, holding his ground like a polite rock. The oldest boy had his hand on Mason's shirt. Nothing yet, but a promise I refused to let mature. We were moving before planning. Rosales stepped cleanly between bodies the way a man sidesteps a falling glass. Easy, he said, a command disguised as suggestion. We're not doing this. It's nothing, Mason said too quickly, eyes flicking to me. He looked like a person who had learned to refuse rescue on principle. I had promised myself I wouldn't be a man who solved with volume. I put my hands where they could be seen and made my voice smaller than the room. Mason, I said, I came to apologize. That stopped 3 people, which was a useful start. The oldest boy, 16, maybe, anger like a salary, snorted. Apologize with what? Words, I said. Then supper. Somebody laughed in a way that didn't want to, and the storm lost 1 degree of heat. Rosalise nodded at the boy's wrist. "Hands off," he said gently. "Not because we say so, because you want to be the kind of person who lets go." The hand released. The boy rolled his eyes in international language, and the knot loosened into a cluster. City weather shifted back to normal. Impatient, hungry, survivable. Mason wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, embarrassed by a fight that had almost been. He looked at me the way a stray looks at an open car door, hope working through suspicion's teeth. "Sir," he said, and the words sounded like he was trying it on again, seeing if it fit. "I accused you with my eyes," I said, quick, before pride could tidy me. "About the watch. I found it behind a chair. I am sorry, not performative sorry. Real sorry, the kind that costs you something." He glanced down at my wrist as if to confirm the watch existed and was not a prop. He nodded once. "Also," I said, because apology is a small meal without a second course, "I let other people's fear make choices in my house. I am trying to be different." A beat passed where rain might have started just to help us. He lifted one shoulder. "Okay," he said, "not forgiveness. Not yet. A location on a map." Someone jostled my back with a hurry that belonged to the whole station. A voice called an arrival that mattered to someone else's life. I had the absurd thought that I should offer him something to sign, as if a child needed a contract to be welcome. Instead, I did the cheapest, richest thing I had. I asked him a question and waited. "Will you come home?" I said. "Not as a favor, as family." His eyes didn't widen. They narrowed as if focus might keep the world from stealing a sentence meant for him. "Family?" he said, tasting the word as if it were fruit out of season. "What does that mean when you say it?" "It means you eat with us," I said. "It means your name is on a door. It means when someone asks if you belong here, we don't say, 'for now.' We say yes. It means you get to keep your dignity while the adults fight the paperwork." He stared at me for 3 beats past what I could comfortably bear. "What about the people with papers?" he asked. "The woman with the folder." "Ms. Rivera," I said. "We partner, not perform. She will see what we are. If she needs us to be better, we will be better." "You sure?" Rosales murmured, but he said it to the air, like a man acknowledging the size of a wave while he paddles anyway. "I'm not sure of anything," I said truthfully, "except that my daughter's voice sounded like a plea today, and that I would like to be the kind of man who answers it." That was the sentence. I watched it walk toward him. He watched it arrive. Somewhere near the ticket kiosks, 2 teenagers began a whispered argument about who owed whom money. The world refused to pause. We learned to do this inside it. Mason rubbed his thumbnail against the edge of his palm. He glanced past me, not over my shoulder but beyond it, toward the memory of a garden where roses stand like patient witnesses. "Can I think while we walk?" he asked. A concession, a yes disguised as caution. We walked, not to the car. Around the station, a private slow circle. He told me the smallest version of the watch story, the part where eyes can break a boy faster than fists. I told him the largest version of Grace, the part where a woman could move furniture and change the moral physics of a room. He laughed once, unexpectedly. "She sounds like Mrs. Vale," he said. "She would take that as a compliment," I said. Mrs. Vale would pretend not to hear. We came back to the car when the sky had finally made up its mind. Rain arrived with theater. People ran and laughed at the same time. The only way to run in weather you can't fix. Mason stepped sideways into the downpour and did 2 clumsy spins, arms wide, a ritual to tell the old hunger he hadn't forgotten its tricks. He shook his hair like a dog and grinned. "It still works," he said. "Moving." "Come test a new method," I said, opening the door. "It's called roof." He climbed in. Rosales pulled us into traffic with the caution of a man who knows how many lives a car holds. In the back seat, Mason watched the city through glass, his forehead leaving a round fog where his breath argued with air conditioning. At a red light, my phone lit up with Lily's second message. "This is your director again. Update, rehearsal rescheduled to today. Attendance, non-negotiable." A beat, then her fingers on the mic. Tap, tap, tap. He heard it and made the sound without meaning to. Two light taps on his knee, then one. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. When we turned onto our street, the house looked less like a house and more like a promise my body could keep. The guard at the gate saw the passenger and pretended not to. The drone did a bored circle. Rosales lifted a hand that translated to, "Not today." Lily was waiting under the tree with the metronome on her lap and a sheet of paper with a list of demands. "Late," she said, which is how some children say I was scared. "Traffic," Mason said solemnly, which is how some boys say I was gone, and now I am not. "Rehearsal," she answered, "now." We did not rehearse. We celebrated. Not balloons, not headlines. Soup, bread, strawberries wearing their green hats like old friends. A new joke about the rosebush earning hazard pay. Mrs. Vale pretending the kitchen sent extra shoes. When the weather remembered itself and rained again, Mason stepped out and danced on the veranda stones while Lily clapped the time, and I stood there like a man lucky enough to know when to be furniture. When he finished, we didn't make it sacred with speeches. We made it ordinary with homework. 10 minutes with the pigeon reader, Mrs. Vale's pencil tapping gently when the end tried to bully him. He read hop, dog aloud, and then, without coaching, looked up and improvised a whole sidebar about a dog who didn't hop when told because it had a better idea. I laughed. I couldn't stop. As the evening thickened, Dr. Chen texted, "Standing trial 9 a.m. tomorrow, only if she wakes easy. No heroics." I typed back, "She'll be ready." Then, because matters of faith sometimes want receipts, I added, "We will be 3. The house exhaled. The guard loosened his shoulders at the gate. Rosales went off shift with a salute that meant more than I'd earned. When it was time for Mason to leave, no one said the word leave. "We'll walk you to the door," Lily said, practicing ownership. At the threshold, he hesitated. The border between the life you know and the one you're trying on is always an unreasonable distance. "Tomorrow," I said. "Will you be here?" He looked down at his gray sneakers as if consulting a counsel. Rain tapped the eaves with officious little fingers. The city muttered to itself beyond the hedge, uninterested in our decision. "Yes," he said, "if the bridge doesn't sing too loud." He smiled, a small, real thing. "I'll tell it to be quiet." We watched him to the gate. He went out with the careful dignity of a boy who knows eyes are on him and wants to leave the right picture behind. He didn't come back that night. A rumor moved among the stalls and under the bridge and through the station's bad lighting. Boys pushed from one corner to another by a man owed money. A new private security guard at the underpass, who enjoyed his newness. A sleep spot gone to construction. Nothing hard, nothing soft. Just the city doing what cities do, shuffling pieces without asking who they are. At 10:47 p.m., a transit officer called the house line. Rosales' friend, quietly decent. "Your kid was near a scuffle," he said. "No arrests. He ran south when the uniforms came, because that's what boys like him do when uniforms come. If he's yours, find him early." I stood in the dark office and watched the garden through glass. The metronome on Lily's nightstand blinked like a patient lighthouse. The folder on my desk held Dr. Chen's schedule. Standing trial 9 a.m. The first calendar item in months that felt like an appointment with the right future. I set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. I put on the jacket that doesn't come with a speech and laid another beside it, smaller, gray, with a hood. Weather insurance for a boy who still thinks moving is the only way to stay warm. In the black pane of the window, 3 shapes waited. Man, girl, boy, none of us saints, all of us stubborn. Tomorrow the metronome would tick. Tomorrow the doctor would stand by a parallel bar and ask us to remember how courage counts. Tomorrow, if the bridge allowed and the city relented and the world looked the other way for once, a boy would keep time with his sneaker toe while a girl rose 1 inch closer to what she already knew she was. We set the house to mercy. The garden held its breath, and somewhere in the rain-struck kilometers between here and the station, Mason listened for a rhythm only he could hear and chose a direction none of us could see. Standing trial 9 a.m., with or without him. I woke before the house. The metronome blinked its tiny lighthouse on my nightstand, silent for once, like it was saving its voice for court. I lay there counting my breath the way Mason taught me. Big in, laugh out. Except laughing by yourself in the dark is weird. So I smiled instead. It helped. The room smelled like linen and the lemon oil Mrs. Vale uses when she is nervous. Down the hall, the house made its settling sounds. Wood speaking to morning, pipes clearing their throats. I listened for the thing I wanted most. The soft double tap of sneakers on the runner and the whisper of a hoodie sleeve against the banister. Nothing. I stared at the ceiling and tried to pretend I was brave enough to do this without him. I told my stomach to be quiet. It argued. Up already? Daddy's voice came from the door. Careful, cheerful. He was in the jacket that doesn't come with speeches. Early call, I said, as if standing had a call sheet. He sat at the edge of the bed and held my hand between both of his, like a man warming his own hope. His eyes had the staying up look, but the panic from last night had drifted. What was left was thinner and stronger. Dr. Chen's on his way. Parallel bars will be set in the garden. Miss Rivera asked if she could observe. I said yes. That last bit bristled the old fear, then smoothed. Ms. Rivera had a folder and a spine that didn't bend the wrong way. She listened like she was writing a story about you where you get to be the hero. Okay, I said. We'll let her watch us win. He smiled, a real one, like we'd made a joke only we understood. Then he looked at my door in the hallway beyond it in a way that meant I also want someone else to walk through it. We waited together for a minute that felt like 3. Then the house told us something with its floorboards, the soft warning of steps trying to be quiet. Daddy's head lifted. I sat up taller. A gray hood appeared in my doorway, then a face I know better than my own hands. He looked like rain the second it decides to be sun again. Morning, Director, Mason said, as if last night had been a rehearsal and today the show. You're late, I told him, because that's how I keep from crying. Traffic, he deadpanned, and a bridge that sings in the wrong key. He crossed the room, dropped to a squat beside the chair, and rubbed his hands together like a coach in a movie. Okay, tools, he said. Breath, count, silly. He puffed his cheeks so big his eyes went small. I laughed from somewhere solid. Again, I ordered, because I am a professional, and he obliged with a face so ridiculous even Daddy made a small, embarrassed sound. We did 3 rounds. Big in, laugh out, tap, 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 shoulders tall. He watched my hands, not my legs. We don't chase the miracle, he said softly. We let it walk to us. Who said that? I asked. Dr. Mason, he said, serious as soup. Now scoot forward, feet flat. Let the ground know you're coming. Outside, the garden woke in pieces. A hedge deciding to be a wall, the fountain practicing verbs, the guard at the gate trying to pretend his eyes weren't shiny. Dr. Chen arrived with 2 assistants and a pair of parallel bars that looked like a bridge we could carry. He set them under the plane tree where the light makes a checkerboard on the grass. Good morning, Lily, he said, as if the day had no choice but to be won. We're going to be cautious and curious. No heroics. Your job is to feel brave and stop before your body is bored. Okay, I said. Mason squeezed my shoulder twice. Daddy stood where I could see him without looking. Miss Rivera took her place like a respectful ghost. Even the drones stayed away, maybe because breakfast is late for robots. I rolled out to the garden. The bars gleamed. The grass held its breath. I placed my hands on cool steel. It felt like a new alphabet under my fingers. First we lean, Dr. Chen said. Then we lift. If you decide no today, no is excellent medicine. I decided yes. Ready? Mason asked under his breath. He made the face again, cheeks out, eyes crossed, and I snorted exactly the kind of snort that would have made Mama say, Grace, your daughter. My chest softened, my shoulders stacked. 1, I whispered. 2, Mason whispered, already grinning. 3, I pushed. My arms shook their way into being the right size. My hips rose the way dawn lifts, quiet then undeniable. My feet found the ground like it was a friend. The whole garden leaned in case it needed to catch me. I stood for 1, 2, 3 seconds that were also a lifetime long enough for 10 memories to make room. Everything made a sound and nothing did. A leaf unclapped. The fountain forgot its next word. I saw Daddy not breathe. I saw Ms. Rivera put a hand to her throat like she'd swallowed a light. I sat down before falling was an option. The world exhaled. Mason didn't say champion this time. He just pressed his forehead to my shoulder and laughed the kind of laugh that has water in it. Again? Dr. Chen asked. He said it lightly, like offering strawberries. I looked at my hands. They were mine. Again, I said. We reset. Breath. Count. Silly. I rose. The ground felt less like a stranger. The bars felt warmer. I let time move at its own speed, and then I matched it. I stood for 4 seconds. 5. When I sat, the garden did not cheer like a stadium. It did something better. It wept like a kitchen where good news is also a prayer. Daddy made a noise I've never heard him make. Dr. Chen took his glasses off to clean them, and then didn't bother, because he was cleaning his eyes instead. I believe, he said quietly, as if the words were an oath and a confession. Mason did a small, ridiculous bow to the bars, and then to me, then to Daddy, then to the rose bush, because respect is a habit now. The guards clapped, shy and earnest, the way men clap at baptisms. Mrs. Vale appeared with a tray and no announcement, because celebration, like grief, needs food. She'd put strawberries on top again, hats and all, because some miracles want costumes. Kitchen sent extra, she murmured, tucking a napkin under my wrist, which is how she says I love you in the dialect of houses. I ate a bite of everything that tasted like victory. Through the hedge a murmur grew, the city clearing its throat. The gate intercom chirped. Rosales' voice came over Daddy's phone. Press gathering, he said. 2 vans, 1 drone up. Daddy looked at Dr. Chen, who looked at me. We keep you out of the frame, the doctor said. This is not for cameras. This is for your nervous system. Agreed, Daddy said. His mouth did its set thing when thinking turns into choosing. Harper's sedan slid to the curb like an opinion. He came across the gravel too fast, tie straight, smile wrong. Magnificent, he said and meant it for a full half-second before remembering his job. Now we say cutting-edge integrative therapy. We highlight the rehab wing. We anchor with science. If you must, mention the boy once. Human interest, not headline. Or, Daddy said, I can tell the truth and trust anyone worth having to understand it. Edward, Harper hissed, as if the sound could change my father. Donors. Donners, Daddy echoed. And I saw something happen to the word in his mouth. It got smaller. They can meet us where we are. He left Harper on the veranda with his arguments and stepped toward the gate. Stay with me? I whispered to Mason. Always, he said. It sounded like a decision signing itself. The gate hummed open to the kind of crowd that pretends to be polite until you give it permission to be loud. Microphones and fists, eyes too bright, the smell of coffee and ambition. The drone bobbed like a curious gull. Rosales kept his shoulders between us and anyone who thought a lens was more real than a person. Mr. Hawthorne, a word. Is it true? Sources say. I raised a hand and the noise did the small courtesy of pausing. Behind me, the house felt alive in a way I can't quantify and will not apologize for. I could feel Lily's gaze on my back, the way a man feels sunlight. Good morning, I said. My voice sounded like it does when I know I'm telling the truth, which is new. You are here because something good happened. My daughter stood today. She did that surrounded by love, by laughter, by a little chaos, by medicine, yes, but not the kind you put in a bottle. Cameras leaned. Dr. Chen will give you the words for what is happening in Lily's body. He can talk about circuits and muscle memory and engagement. I will not take that from him. What I will say is this. We found a therapy we could afford years ago and forgot how to value. Joy, connection, the daily practice of being seen. Harper closed his eyes very briefly, the way a man does when a speech refuses to behave. A boy named Mason comes to our garden, I went on. He dances. My daughter laughs. She claps. She presses herself up, not because a machine commands it, but because hope is now a thing with a face. Our doctor watched. He adjusted. He believed. We are grateful for the science. We are alive because of the kindness. Mr. Hawthorne, a reporter interrupted. What about the social services investigation? Allegations that an unknown minor. Social services is doing its job, I said. We are cooperating with respect. The boy has a name. He is known to us. He is safe with us. He is not an unknown. He is Mason. Are you establishing a program? Another asked, probably sent by Harper in a past life. Hawthorne Foundation, Youth Arts Pilot? We're establishing a table where the people who did the work can eat, I said, letting Grace run the sentence. If later we build programs, we will ask the right people to write the first draft. A pause. The sound of a plane cutting a slow line across the sky. And then a question I did not expect and had been rehearsing anyway. What is Mason to you? I could feel Harper's look in my peripheral vision, like a cold hand on a warm glass. I stepped closer to the microphones, because sometimes proximity is protection. He is family, I said. The word changed the air. You could hear it adjust its posture. We will be filing to adopt him, I added. Publicly, properly. We will do it in daylight. We will invite oversight, and we will ask for patience while we make our house into the kind of place where more than one miracle is possible. You could see the line of questions double. You could feel Harper's blood pressure invent new numbers. Rosal's mouth twitched into something like a suppressed smile. Motivation? Someone called. Is this optics after criticism? My motivation is my daughter's laughter, I said. My motivation is a boy who taught my house to breathe. If your headline says rich man discovers basic humanity late, that's accurate. Print it. Somebody laughed, unwillingly honest. The drone's tilt changed, that odd mechanical curiosity. We will have a written statement later, I finished. For now, we have a child to feed. I turned because endings matter. Harper followed, hissing, You just made us a target. Then we'll be the kind with a porch light, I said, and I left him there on the veranda with his portfolio and his cleverness. Inside, the house applauded without clapping. Dr. Chen squeezed my shoulder once. A man who understands that touch can be a thesis. Miss Rivera nodded, her face soft with something like relief. Daylight, she said under her breath. It helps. I went to the garden. Lily was waiting between the bars, standing in the kind of way that doesn't need proof anymore. Mason stood beside her, his hand hovering near hers like a polite bodyguard. He looked at me with a question he was afraid to ask twice. Family, I said again to both of them. If you want it. Mason blinked. The bridge flickered through his eyes and then was gone. Okay, he whispered. Then louder, because some words want the open. Okay. I've learned that when the world becomes too loud, you make a smaller world inside it. 3 taps on your knee, a breath that counts to 3, a face only she can make you make. Today the world was a radio crowding every station. Men at the gate with microphones like little hammers, a drone staring like a rude bird, Harper with his tie and his sad mouth. So I made the small world. Big in, laugh out, I told Lily. We did it twice and the noise fell a step behind us. I held my hand near hers without touching, because I've learned that sometimes help is being nearby and not fixing a thing. When she stood the first time, I felt the ground shift under both of us, not in a scary way, in the way a boat admits its water it's been sitting on all along. When she stood the second time, the shift took root. People made those noises grown-ups make when a small person makes them remember how to pray. Dr. Chen said, I believe like a man breaking a fast. Then Mr. Hawthorne went to the gate and said a sentence I didn't know could be said in public. He is family. He said the other thing too, the big one, with letters so serious they hardly fit in my ears. Adopt. The crowd made a rustle. The drone moved. The man with the portfolio turned a color I don't have a word for. I didn't move, not because I was brave, because moving is what I do when I want to keep from feeling something. Today I felt it. Family. When you sleep under a bridge, that word is a story other people tell. It belongs to living rooms with couches you shouldn't jump on and kitchens where the drawers close all the way. It belongs to arguments about nothing and rules about shoes and the way someone says your name like they've practiced loving it. Do you want it? Mr. Hawthorne asked when he came back, quieter now. The crowd still buzzing behind him like a hive too far to sting. I didn't know how to say yes without it sounding like please. I've never liked the way please tastes when you've had to say it too much. So I looked at Lily. She was standing again, barely, just enough, and her eyes were steady like they get when the punchline lands exactly where it should. "You made me brave," she had said last night. She didn't have to say it today. She was showing it. "Okay," I said. Then I took one of her fingers, the smallest, safest one, and tapped our code into it. Tap, tap, tap. That's yes in our language. The house seemed to hear. The guard at the gate lifted his chin like a man told to stand at ease. Mrs. Vale pretended to look for a spoon until her eyes stopped thinking about water. Dr. Chen checked his watch and then didn't care what it said. Monsieur Rivera wrote something down and smiled to herself like a person who gets to put a good word in a box labeled outcome. Outside, the noise grew again, the kind that smells like ink. I know how the world can turn joy into candy and eat it without tasting. I felt the old urge to run, to become small, to be a rock no one trips on. I didn't run. I stood where I was and counted with her breath. 1, 2, 3. Then we sat together, because choosing to sit is part of standing too. "Tomorrow," Dr. Chen said gently, "we rest." "Tomorrow," Lily repeated, then looked at me with mischief back in her mouth. "But later today, rehearsal, the detective who finds his family in his shoe." "We need a better title," and I said, even though it sounded perfect. She grinned. "We do not." We ate soup. The strawberries wore their hats. The house settled into the kind of quiet that isn't empty at all. On the other side of the hedge, the press shouted for more words. "That's how crowds pray." Mr. Hawthorne said there would be a statement later. "That's how rich men buy time." Harper made phone calls into the wind. "That's how worry writes memos." I cleaned my bowl and then opened the blue book with the pigeons. Mrs. Vale tapped the table. 10 minutes, she said. Then outside with the director. I read, "Run, cat. Hop, dog. Easy lines. Harder life." When I stumbled on home, the letters stood still long enough for me to touch them. I tapped Lily's finger again. Tap, tap, tap. Through the hedge, the crowd changed shape. The drone came lower, curious again, as if it wanted to make our small world into its large one. Rosales stepped into its path the way a person might walk between a child and a wave. Not angry, just present. The drone drifted back, thinking. In the evening, Mr. Hawthorne stood by the portrait of the woman who makes his face different and told her what he'd done. I don't know the words he used. I don't need to. The house answered him by feeling taller. Before I left, he pulled me aside. Not to the study, not to the places where men pretend they're only their jobs. To the kitchen, where the air knows your real name. He held out a small envelope with my name on it in his handwriting, careful letters that don't hurry. "Appointment with Ms. Rivera," he said. "First step. We'll walk together." "How long does adoption take?" I asked, hating my own need to measure. "As long as it takes to do it right," he said. "And as long as it takes us to keep choosing you." He paused. "We plan to be punctual." I put the envelope in my pocket next to the pigeons. It felt like a book with only good chapters. At the door, Lily didn't say, "Don't go." She said, "Tomorrow." It felt different, like we were rehearsing a future instead of resisting an ending. I saluted the rose bush because I am a man of tradition now and stepped into a city that, for once, felt like it would keep. Behind me, Mr. Hawthorne walked to the gate. The microphones jumped. He lifted a hand. "One more thing," he said, and the crowd quieted like a school. "We'll be filing to adopt," he repeated, turning promise into policy. "We'll invite you to watch the paperwork if you must. But here is the only quote that matters today." She stood. He turned away before anyone could sell that sentence. The drone hovered, then drifted, as if even robots sometimes know when to leave a moment alone. The house set itself to mercy. The garden held its breath and then let it go. And somewhere above us, in a sky that was learning our names, the next day lined itself up, counting 1, 2, 3, until morning. The adoption began in daylight, exactly as promised. Miss Rivera returned with a checklist and a smile that had learned to be patient. We walked room to room while the house confessed its history, echoes in the high ceilings, the soft creak on the third stair, the places where grief had once kept its boxes, papers stacked in neat piles, references phoned, background checks filed. Mason chose the bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with afternoon light and a small alcove where a desk could fit. A reading fort, he called it, and Mrs. Rivera's veil immediately measured for shelves. "We will move at the speed of right," Ms. Rivera said, and for once I didn't hear a delay hidden in the phrasing. I heard care. At the first home study meeting, she asked the only question that mattered, and she asked it of him. "Mason, do you want this?" He looked at her, then at me, then toward the open door where Lily's laugh drifted like a hand offering balance. "Yes," he said. Not a rescued yes, a chosen one. When she left, I stood by Grace's portrait and gave a small report. "We are underway. You can stop pushing the furniture in my head." The paperwork became its own rhythm. Sign, initial, breathe. In between signatures, life filled the quiet. My new room smelled like sawdust and lemon oil in the future. There was a bed I was allowed to sleep in every night and a window that kept its promises. On the first morning, I woke up before the house and panicked, because that's what you do when a dream is too good to touch. Then I saw the gray hoodie on the chair and the reader with the pigeons on the desk and remembered home. At breakfast, I learned the rules. Coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for me if I say the word please like I mean it, and no phone at the table unless the phone belongs to someone who is saving a life. Mrs. Vale's corollary, she is always saving a life, mostly ours. Lily told jokes she stole from the internet and improved with a wink. "Why did the robot eat a clock?" she asked one morning. "Why?" I said, mouth full of toast. "It wanted seconds." We groaned. We laughed anyway. That's family. After breakfast came homework. Mine now included actual homework, which was both terrifying and beautiful. We started small, 10 minutes with the blue reader, then 10 more with something not about pigeons, lists of sight words, a story about a girl who builds a kite from nothing. When the letters tired me, I danced in my chair, just enough to make the frustration loosen its grip. When you move, I told myself quietly, heaviness remembers it can be light. In the afternoons, the garden became our stage again. The program changed with us. Lily and I wrote "The Detective Who Finds His Family in His Shoe" and retired it after we nailed the ending. We premiered The Magnificent Metronome, a comedy about patience, and The Pigeon Negotiations too. This time it's personal. Sometimes Edward watched with his tie undone, laughing like a man who had decided to be good at it. At night, after dishes and poems and the kind of silence that isn't empty at all, I stood at my window and listened for the bridge. It still sang. It always will. I told it good night anyway. The parallel bars moved inside on rainy days, out beneath the plane tree on gold ones. Dr. Chen visited twice a week and texted the rest, which made him sound like a cool older cousin. We added braces and learned their choreography. Buckle, adjust, breathe, count. The first time I took a step, the house felt it. Something in the floorboards leaned with me. 3 independent steps, Dr. Chen said one morning, like a dare we agreed to. I looked at my legs and told them a secret. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be brave 3 times. Mason coached from my right, 2 taps on my shoulder that meant, "You're ready." Daddy hovered on my left like a polite umbrella. Mrs. Vale stood in the doorway, pretending to be annoyed at the flower on her apron. I lifted, leaned, stepped. My body shouted in firefly flashes, tremor, hold, breathe, and then quieted. 1, I did it again. 2. On the 3rd step, I stopped waiting for the ground to catch me. I met it halfway, which is a very grown-up thing to do. After, Daddy cried the kind of tears men will claim are allergies if you give them an exit. He didn't take it. He let the water do what water does. Dr. Chen cleared his throat until the moment looked the other way. Mason bowed to me and then to the braces, because respect is a habit we refuse to lose. 3, I told the garden, because it had earned the number 2. Something shifted in my work the same week Lily took those 3 steps. It was as if the rooms I sat in realized they were supposed to be circles. The merger I'd stepped away from still huffed in the corner, like a machine that resented not being worshipped. Harper arrived to summon me back with the right verbs: fiduciary, stakeholder, duty, and the wrong heart. "Edward," he said, "we are not a charity." "I am," I answered, and surprised us both. "Or I intend to be." He blinked. We part ways then. We do, I said. I offered my hand because civility is not complicity. We can disagree without shrinking. He stared at it for a long and unprofessional second, took it, and left with a press release that used phrases like philosophical differences and strategic recalibration. Optics cost me donors who wanted their names on plaques more than their hands on plow handles. It gained me others, the ones who wrote checks without press kits and asked useful questions like, what does success feel like for a child who hasn't laughed in a year? From that soil grew the Hawthorne Fellowship, a small, stubborn fund for homeless youth in arts and rehabilitation. Not a photo opportunity, a basket, shoes, tutors, therapy sessions where laughter is counted as data. We partnered with the soup kitchen, the bus park vendors, and the community clinic. We paid the market women for their quiet social work retroactively and asked them to keep their receipts only if it didn't insult them. The first fellows used our back garden for practice on Saturdays. Mason taught pigeon negotiations to a crowd of boys who learned that silliness can be a kind of armor. Lily sat in the shade with a whistle and notes and all the authority of a director. Mrs. Vale kept a table of sandwiches and a stack of gray socks that would always be extras from the kitchen. Dr. Chen dropped by with a metronome and a grin he tried to hide. One afternoon, Ms. Rivera came with a clipboard and a softer step. Just observing, she said, and I pretended to believe her. At the end, she slipped me a paper with a check mark in the box labeled recommended. The court date is on its way, she added, and I realized I'd been holding my shoulders wrong for months. That night, I stood under Grace's portrait and gave her the update in a sentence she would have edited. We are not done, but dear God, we are different. Morning. Cereal crunch. The low sermon of the coffee maker. Lily's pencil tapping code against the table leg. Tap, tap, tap. Mason's voice sounding out bigger words. Homework, heartbeat, hopeful. Edward reading aloud the first page of a book that has nothing to do with finance and everything to do with courage. Afternoon. Lessons, therapy, and wardrobe meetings in which Lily insists that braces can be decorated within reason. Roses, she says, because the rose bush is an original cast member. Mason helps Rosalis hose off the veranda between shows and learns that dignity has 1,000 uniforms. Evening, garden light going honey soft, a small speaker on the table playing the old jazz standard Grace adored. The song works like a bridge between then and now, laying planks at the speed of memory. Sometimes Edward dances badly with his daughter anyway, swaying while Mason conducts with 2 fingers and a steadfast grin. Supper, stories from the day, Mrs. Vale's war with a stubborn doe, Dr. Chen's confession that he teared up watching a patient grasp the edge of a parallel bar, Rosala's tale about a drone that fled after he offered it a sandwich. Laughter like a ceiling fan, constant, simple, necessary. Night, homework and hot chocolate, then prayers in the dialect each person knows. Whispered thanks, a kiss on a picture frame, a hand placed grave and gentle on a closed door as you pass. It arrived like most important days do, written in ink, disguised as a Tuesday. We dressed as if it were both. Mason wore the gray hoodie and a collared shirt that made him sigh like an adult already exhausted by collars. Lily wore a dress with a small bow, braces decorated with stamped roses. I wore the jacket that doesn't come with speeches. The judge had a kind face that stayed professional. The questions were simple and enormous. Mr. Hawthorne, why adoption? Because family is something you do, I said, and he is ours. Lily, how do you feel about this? The judge asked because the wise ask children what the adults pretend to know. Lily lifted her chin. He makes me brave, she said. Also, he is funny. I think families need both. Mason's turn. Do you consent? The judge asked, and I loved her for using the word where it mattered. Mason nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I picked them back. The gavel sounded like a small, polite thunder. Papers were signed. Ms. Rivera squeezed my arm with a pressure that meant you did the thing you said you would do. Outside, the city noticed and did not. Cars kept being late. Pigeons kept settling ridiculous arguments. Inside us, something finished beginning. Harper's farewell email landed with the kind of careful pride men wear when they think they're losing gracefully. He took 2 clients, 3 assistants, and all the chairs he'd brought to tables that no longer looked like tables to me. I wished him luck. He wished me a new PR firm. We both meant well. We had simply become different species. In his place came quiet advisors, a teacher from the community center who explained why stipends work better than vouchers, a physical therapist who asked for a line item called joy supplies and then produced a spreadsheet that would make a CFO applaud, a market woman who suggested placing a cooler of oranges by the gate for kids who run past too fast to be hungry. Purpose replaced performance like a new heartbeat under an old suit. Donations dipped, then steadied, then started to come with notes that said things like, "My son laughed for the first time in a year. Please use this where it feels right." We did. The sun lingered the way it does when it has nothing better to do than be kind. The plane tree stitched light across the lawn. The roses, Grace's roses, leaned as if eavesdropping on good gossip. We set the little speaker on the table and played her song. It turned the garden gold from the inside. Lily stood between the bars, then took 3 steps with her braces and sat. Not because she fell, but because she chose to. Power in that verb that medicine can't quantify. Mason bowed to her and then to the rosebush. Rosalie saluted no one in particular. Dr. Chen pretended to adjust his glasses. Miss Jari Rivera, off duty, leaned on the veranda rail with a smile she didn't have to write down. I, Edward, stood there and looked at the two of them, my daughter and my son, and felt the house seal a chapter without shutting a door. "You know," I said, more to Grace than to the air, "I thought I had everything, but I had nothing, until Joy knocked on my gate barefoot." Lily rolled her eyes like only the young can do, without being cruel, and said to the invisible camera she's sure is always watching, "Sometimes the medicine is a friend." We let the song finish. The light thinned to that last generous inch. The metronome blinked from the table, not keeping time anymore, just keeping company. The drone, if there was one, stayed away. The world for this minute minded its own business. We ate strawberries with their green hats still on, because some miracles insist on costumes. The kitchen sent extra. The house learned a new word for silence. It meant full. And when the evening took our shadows long across the grass, we counted together the way we do now. 1, 2, 3, then laughter, then breath, then home.